welcome to I am the resurrection and the life. Certainly one of those texts that you probably associate with funerals. But there's an awful lot to this story. So let's begin with a prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for St. John, for his understandings and his writings. We pray as we think about the resurrection and the life, that his words will speak to us and we may understand more of what your Son is calling each and every one of us to. Amen. Right. So, first paragraph, the headings aren't actually in the originals. People kind of dream these up, a bit like newspaper headlines. So, would somebody like to read the first 16 verses of the death of Lazarus?
Start if you like. Now a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. Mary was the one who anointed the Lord with perfume and wiped his feet with her hair. Her brother Lazarus was ill. So the sisters sent a message to Jesus, "Lord, he whom you love is ill." But when Jesus heard it, he said, "This illness does not lead to death, rather it is for God's glory, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it." Accordingly, though Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus, after having heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. Then after this he said to the disciples, "Let us go to Judea again." The disciples said to him, "Rabbi, the Jews were just now trying to stone you, and are you going there again?" Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours of daylight? Those who walk during the day do not stumble, because they see the light of this world. But those who walk at night stumble, because the light is not in them." After saying this, he told them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to awaken him." The disciples said to him, "Lord, if he has fallen asleep, he will be all right." Jesus, however, had been speaking about his death, but they thought that he was referring merely to sleep. Then Jesus told them plainly, "Lazarus is dead. For your sake I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him." Thomas, who was called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, "Let us also go, that we may die with him."
Thank you. Sometimes when you really look hard at John's Gospel, it's quite difficult what has actually been given to us. You can sort of paint Jesus in rather a kind of sinister light. But I think we have to be aware that St. John, in writing his Gospel, had a series of things he was determined that his reader would come away with. And quite importantly, in this particular story, he is thinking in terms of the resurrection of Lazarus from the dead. So we have Lazarus and Mary and Martha, three people who are obviously very important to Jesus. Mary, we're told, was the one who anointed the Lord with perfume and wiped his feet with her hair. So the sisters, like anybody who got a sick relative in that time, sent the message to Jesus. And then St. John uses the opportunity to teach the disciples some things. Jesus talks about it not leading to death, but being there for the glory of God. so that the Son of God may be glorified through it. And this picture of glory weaves its way all the way through this story, and literally weaves its way all the way through St. John's Gospel. Think back to the beginning. In him we beheld the glory of the God. And we'll sort of see that through Jesus' teaching, through his miracles, through his suffering and his death and his resurrection, John keeps coming back and telling us that God is glorified through this. So glory is the first theme that comes up. And John makes fairly sure that whoever's reading his gospel can be very, very sure that at the end of this, Lazarus will be dead before he's raised from the dead. So we have Jesus literally staying behind. No sense of urgency. And then the disciples are surprised because he appears to change his mind. You can't go back there, Jesus. They were trying to stone you the other day. And Jesus speaks of the light and daylight, which was the theme of my talk a few weeks ago, which is why I put the candle back again, to remind us of that light. The light that speaks to the darkness inside each and every one of us, that helps us to see Jesus for who he truly is. So we're going to see glory, we're going to see light too. So he says, we're going to see Lazarus, who's fallen asleep. And just again to emphasize what's about to happen, Jesus said, no, he's dead. And then we get the statement from Thomas. And we all know that throughout the gospel, again, the story of Thomas weaves its way through. Right to the end, where Thomas literally falls down on his knees, having met the risen Christ, and says, my Lord and my God, which is the most kind of profound statement about Jesus that we find. And so Jesus and his disciples make their way to Bethany. Someone like to read the next paragraph, please?
When Jesus arrived, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now Bethany was near Jerusalem, some 2 miles away, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them about their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out and met him, while Mary stayed at home. Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that God will give you whatever you ask of him. And Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. And Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? And she said, yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one coming into the world. Do you want me to carry on?
No, that's fine. So the next character in the story is Martha. Mary pops up later. Martha obviously believes in the resurrection from the dead. It's not something every Jewish person believes in, but it was obviously important to her belief that one day the dead will rise. And She has faith that Jesus can do something. It's very much a kind of a thought-out faith that we see in Martha. And so she says, I believe that I could have stopped my brother from dying, but I also believe that God will give you whatever you ask from him. And then Jesus comes out with the words which are the title of our talk, really. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live, and everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. It's a very profound statement. Jesus is firmly identifying what St. John knows from experience is the person who rose from the dead on Easter Day. And that in him there is life everlasting, there is resurrection from the dead. And that's the only way you can find it in John's eyes. So Jesus says, do you believe this? And she said, yes, I believe you're the one, the Messiah, the Son of God, the one coming into the world. It's my turn to read now. And it's Mary's turn now. Jesus weeps. When she had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary and told her privately, the teacher is here and is calling for you. And when she heard it, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet come to the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. The Jews who were with her in the house, consoling her, saw Mary get up quickly and go out. They followed her because they thought she was going to the tomb to weep there. When Mary came where Jesus was and saw him, she knelt at his feet and said to him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her also weeping, he was greatly disturbed in spirit and deeply moved. He said, where have you laid him? They said to him, Lord, come and see. Jesus began to weep. So the Jews said, see how he loved him. But some of them said, could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying? So Mary comes to Jesus. And again, she has that kind of desperate faith that Martha had. Martha kind of is very much the one who thinks with the head. Mary is definitely the one who thinks with the heart. Literally throws herself at his feet. If you remember back at the beginning, she's the one who's anointed his feet with oil. And then John gives us a lovely insight into Jesus. Imagine arriving at a funeral, next to kids weeping, and all the friends and all the neighbours who were there too, they're weeping, almost in solidarity. And despite all that's gone before, we get a glimpse of a Jesus who actually feels what's going on. It's true humanity. It says he was greatly disturbed in spirit. And spirit, again, is a theme that makes its way through St. John's Gospel. Spirit is God at work in this world. And that spirit is disturbed. And he is kind of deeply moved. And the word that John uses in the Greek is very much a kind of passionate, emotional response that could perhaps be a bit angry too. So in some ways, was he responding to Mary, feeling her sadness, and in a form of kind of neighbourly solidarity, joining in? We all see things on the television that make us cry. Or was he a bit cross with the mourners, who I suspect some of them were kind of professional mourners?
Because it's a thing to do, isn't
Yeah.
it? If it was a funeral, you cry, and that was it.
I remember my first funeral in Liverpool 8. Somebody died, everybody on the estate had the black dresses out. They were there making cups of tea for anybody who came to the house. And it was a lovely sense of community solidarity. But, it's not quite the kind of very private way of doing things we have nowadays. And this would be even more public. And so Jesus begins to weep. And it really truly speaks of his humanity. Because he is God who has become a man. Truly human, truly God. So, in the midst of this crowd, there's two opinions really. First one is, see how much he loved him. The second one was, well, couldn't he have done better than this and got here sooner and stopped his mouth from dying? But that's human nature, isn't it? You'll always get detractors as well as people who see the best reason you're doing it. So, Peter, would you like to read the next bit?
Mm-hmm. Then Jesus, again greatly disturbed, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone was lying against it. Jesus said, "Take away the stone." Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, "Lord, already there is a stench because he's been dead for 4 days." Jesus said to her, "Did I not tell you that if you believed you would see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone, and Jesus looked upwards and said, "Father, I thank you for having heard me. I knew that you always hear me. But I have said this for the sake of the crowd standing here, so that they may believe that you sent me." When he had said this, he cried with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The dead man came out, his hands and feet bound with strips of cloth, and his face wrapped in cloth. Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go."
Again, Jesus is greatly disturbed, as he was greatly disturbed when he saw Mary weeping. So he asked them to take the stone away. Martha, who's the fairly practical one, said, "Well, it's a bit smelly in there. It's been there for 4 days." You have to kind of cross-reference that, though, with Mary wiping our Lord's feet with perfume. And in the next chapter, and she does it even in a bigger way, Jesus says, "She's doing this for my burial." So Lazarus really is kind of as human as you can get, whereas Jesus doesn't necessarily smell in the same way. And then Jesus again talks about the glory of God. Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God? And then we have Jesus praying to his Father. There's a kind of intimacy there that we see. So we have Jesus, who is human and knows how to weep. Jesus, who is able to be disturbed by what's going on around him. Jesus, who is literally so close to his Father. He could talk to him in the way that you and I talk in this moment. So then we come to the miracle. Lazarus come out. This is the first resurrection in John's Gospel. Later on, Jesus himself will be resurrected from the dead. Lazarus comes out, his hands and feet bound with strips of cloth, his face wrapped in a cloth. If you think about the story of Easter Day, the strips of cloth, everything neatly rolled up on the side. No one needs to say to Jesus about Jesus and bind him and let him go. And so Lazarus is restored to his family, is restored to life, and all the trappings of death are removed.